How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Set 6, and today we have got the full breakdown of, I'm not even doing it, Chapter 4 of the First Soldier. I know we normally do the Final Fantasy VII, Ever Crisis. No, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. It's too much. But yeah, we've got the full breakdown of Chapter 4 today. Some interesting stuff happens. So we're going to jump straight into it. Please do like the video, subscribe for future content, but here we go. Now, in the previous chapter, we had the whole thing with Sephiroth and the Masamune and the little conflict that he had with Masamune. We also saw Sephiroth getting pulled further and further into these visions. And we also saw Angeal resisting against these visions. And we saw how he was able to fight back against the pull of Jenova. So we pick up where we left off in the previous chapter, which is with Glenn, apparently, calling out to Sephiroth. And everyone being a little bit like, oh, what's Glenn doing here? What's going on here, eh? And the confusion is only going to grow. So, you know, be prepared for that. But yeah, we pick up where we left off with Glenn calling out to Sephiroth, and Bachman is again narrating it and talking about how Glenn is the only black mark on Sephiroth's record, and how not many people at Shinran know about what happened with Glenn. And that, you know, it's a little bit shocking that you can hear Glenn here. Hear Glenn here? Yeah, that works. He's a little bit surprised. Bachman's a little bit taken aback. He's taken abackman. Ha ha. But after this, everyone takes a break and just gets themselves together, and then Sephiroth decides, right, we're going to head off, we're going to go and follow this voice and see what the deal is. And as Sephiroth and everyone else goes to leave, Glenn appears in front of Sephiroth. And there are two pretty interesting things about this appearance. The first off is that Glenn is wearing the all-black cloak. Obviously it's his version of the all-black cloak, but it's the same thing that we see him wearing in the conflict with Sephiroth at the start of the First Soldier, and it's the same cloak, seemingly, that we see him in Rebirth. I'm less sure about that, but maybe. But there's definitely a visual shift in Glenn compared to how he was the last time Sephiroth saw him. Obviously we had the thing at the end of Chapter 1 where we do see this future Glenn and an adult Sephiroth, but I'm talking from the perspective of kid Sephiroth, young Sephiroth. The last time young Sephiroth saw Glenn, as far as we know, he was just dressed normally in his usual Shinra gear, in his, you know, going out clothes, his Sunday best. But right now, he's definitely taken the appearance of a black cloak, basically. That's definitely what this outfit evokes. But then he says, interestingly, that Rosen went deeper into the cave, and that something's gotten into him maybe he's been alone for too long, and that Matt and Lucia are looking for him, and does Sephiroth mind helping out? And Glenn runs away. Now, if you've been paying attention, you know that this is pretty weird, because Rosen is super dead. Super dead. Sephiroth made sure that Rosen was super dead, and Sephiroth points that out to the group. He explains who Rosen is, says that he's a friend of Glenn's, you know, they met him in Rador, I killed him, it was fun, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, a very weird moment in this first section of the chapter. Definitely more of the illusory stuff that's been going on in this area, where the group have been seeing visions and seemingly getting knowledge that they shouldn't have. And I mean, we'll get round to it at the end of the chapter, but it's definitely Jenova messing around with Sephiroth. And because this area is so corrupted by Jenova from the events of 2,000 years ago, it's a focal point for all of that. And it makes sense that Glenn, Matt and Lucia are seemingly popping up here. It just makes sense. And it explains why Sephiroth and Angeal have both been having these visions that they've been having. You know, it's definitely Jenova. I mean, we've been there for a few chapters now. It's quite obvious that it's Jenova, but everything just kind of keeps stacking up and stacking up and stacking up. And we're going to see in this chapter a lot more of the sort of stuff we've already seen going on with Jenova. And we'll get to it anyway. I digress. We continue. We head into the ruins. But before that happens, we get a little bit of a reminiscent moment from Sephiroth, where he's thinking back to the events of Rador, and specifically Rosen. And he talks about how Rosen, because he was the last member of the Rador people, he and Sephiroth were alike, and Sephiroth didn't quite understand that. And personally, I think that's definitely him just pointing out that he's lonely. Like, you can see how lonely Sephiroth is, you can see the barriers and the walls that Sephiroth puts up around himself, and Rosen's in the same boat, essentially. He was in the same boat at the start of the first soldier anyway, because he was that solo man on the outpost, just keeping an eye on everything, watching out for mana torrents. So he's got that solitude anyway, but now it's kind of been enforced by the fact that the Redoran people are just gone. But Sephiroth doesn't see that, but he does see that Rosen was a threat to him. And that's definitely going to come back up in this chapter. But yeah, Glenn, Matt and Lucia are just sat there looking out at the smokestack and watching the smoke signals. Sephiroth comes over, and Glenn, Matt and Lucia are talking about how, you know, they're the only ones watching the smokestacks now because he's the only person left in Rador, and they owe that to him. And Sephiroth's like, don't you think you're being a bit friendly with the enemy, mate? You know, maybe fraternize with the enemy a little bit less. But the group are resistant to that, and Glenn again points out the similarities between Rosen and Sephiroth, how Rosen's kind of bit off more than he can chew and he's stuck in this situation now, and Sephiroth's sort of in the same boat. He's bit off a bit more than he can chew, maybe, or maybe he's had more than he can chew bit off for him by Hojo and Shimmer in general, but either way, the position that they find themselves in is one of solitude. And, you know, they have to deal with the problems that pop up themselves. That's definitely the way that Sephiroth is. We see it throughout the chapter, the way he's pushing Angeal back. And that's obviously because he doesn't want to have the feelings that he had, essentially, when, you know, he was friends with Glenn and Matt and Lucia. He doesn't want that loss afterwards when he's not around them. So he's putting that barrier up to protect himself. But also you've got the way that he's been treated by Shinra as well, which is kind of done that to him and kind of put him on this pedestal. And we get a scene straight afterwards where it's Sephiroth in the training environment again with Hojo just watching on. And obviously Sephiroth smashes everything that's put in his path, and everyone's around him saying, oh, he's amazing, he's the hero that we've heard about. But Sephiroth says that, yeah, I was showered with praise by everybody, but no one got close to me. No one tried to see who I really was. And it's just reinforcing that loneliness that Sephiroth has, whether it's people treating him in a manner that makes him lonely, whether it's Shinra using him in a manner that makes him lonely, or whether it's him trying to resist and keep himself away from being hurt that makes him lonely. All of it is kind of pushing Sephiroth into this position of solitude. And we all know what Jenova loves best. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Anyway, we close off this scene with Glenn, Matt, Lucia and Sephiroth just chatting, and Glenn says how he can't wait for Sephiroth to meet Rosen and for them to be buddies. Whew. And even at this point, Sephiroth's like, oh, I don't know about that, mate. Not too sure we're going to be buddies, going to be honest with you. So, yeah, a little bit awkward. And Sephiroth goes on to talk about how he'd feel anxious whenever they spoke about Rosen. And he clearly feels threatened by him. It seems that he feels threatened by the relationship that Rosen has with Glenn and the others, that, I don't know, that relationship's going to diminish his relationship with Glenn and the others. It's pretty weird, but it's definitely indicative of someone who hasn't dealt with many social interactions because they were grown in a lab, basically, and then used as a little child soldier. It makes complete sense. He's going to be rubbish with social interactions and social dynamics. We've seen it repeatedly in the previous episode of The First Soldier, where he was just getting it wrong all the time when he was interacting with other people. And we've seen it in this episode of The First Soldier, episode 2, the stuff in Igara and Robio. It's just the way Sephiroth is. So it makes sense that he would be weird and feel threatened about this kid that everyone goes on about and seems to have some degree of reverence for. Now, before we get too deep into this, we need to take a moment once again to talk about Ava Media and something they've sent me out recently that's going to help out massively when it comes to capturing gameplay for chapters like this. And the thing that they've sent me is the Elite Go. Now, the Elite Go is an all-in-one charging device, capture device, and even a HDMI pass-through device so that you can pass through what you're doing to a big screen, a large monitor, something like that. It's got 4K 60 HDMI pass-through, it's got 1080p at 60 FPS video capture, and it connects nice and easily via USB-C. So you can connect whatever device it is that you're using that connects via USB-C to the Elite Go, and then connect up to your PC or laptop using USB-C, and boom, you are ready to go. I'll make sure the link's in the description, and make sure you use promo code SECTOR66 when you're over there to get some discount and to let them know where you came from. Anyway, back to the video. We pick back up with Sephiroth, Angeal, Alyssa and Bachman, and Sephiroth's explaining the situation with Rosen and Glenn and everything like that, and how Glenn saw Sephiroth kill Rosen, so it's a bit weird that Glenn's being like this. And Angeal's immediately like, yeah, this doesn't sit right. This feels funny. This feels funny, I don't think we should trust this. But Sephiroth's just like, sword. But yet again, it's Angeal that is the one that's kind of like, well, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. Angeal's definitely the one that's got his shit together the most out of this group, and seems to be the most aware of what's going on. And it continues in the next area with Angeal saying like, look, I need to speak my mind, this is dodgy, the spirits in this place are leading you astray, we need to, you know, stop, we need to chill, let's relax. And Sephiroth's like, well, you know, let's just say you're right and the spirits are leading me astray, which they obviously are, but it's not really spirits, it's Jenova, but yeah, it's definitely leading him astray. But Sephiroth's like, even if it is, I don't care. Sword. And then Sephiroth just does his usual trick of just walking off and just ending the conversation like, I'm done, bye. And yeah, it works. Everyone follows after him. Now, something interesting happens here, and it definitely adds fuel to the fire of Alyssa is Jenova and trying to mess with Sephiroth. Because as we're heading down a stairway further into the ruins, Alyssa stops Sephiroth and just asks him like, oh, that Glenn, Matt and Lucia, they were more than just friends to you, right? And it's literally as if she's trying to bring these feelings and memories to the surface as much as possible so that they can be manipulated. So she can see that he's thrown by this and she's like, okay, cool, I'm going to keep pushing this button. So she keeps pushing the button. And Sephiroth's like, yeah, they were the only people that treated me like a normal kid rather than giving me special treatment, so they were important to me. And then we cut to another flashback of Sephiroth with Glenn, Matt and Lucia, and Glenn's needling Sephiroth a little bit about why he won't accept that him and Rosen are quite similar. But Sephiroth's not having it, and everyone's kind of pointing things out, like, you know, you've both put your life on the line, you're both very single-minded and focused on your task. And Sephiroth's like, no, we're nothing alike, we're not the same. And he points it out that he didn't choose his path. He was put on his path. He's not made a choice to be here. Shinra have made that choice for him. And he doesn't feel like he's putting his life on the line either, which is obviously him having the ultimate confidence in his abilities. He's like, yeah, this is easy, nothing's come close to me, I'm fine, I am fine. So yeah, Sephiroth openly identifies the way that him and Rosen are not similar. You know, he's not made the choice to be here, Shinra made that choice for him. Anyway, we get a little bit more fight, and then afterwards a little bit of playful banter, with Sephiroth realising like, oh, like, yeah, we could be friends, you know? We could be friends. Maybe not just allies, but friends. And then we cut back to Sephiroth in the tunnel, and this is definitely, like I say, Alyssa jabbing at Sephiroth, bringing those memories to the forefront. The group pushes on further, and Angeal then asks Sephiroth about Rosen. He's like, oh, you killed him, didn't you? What's the deal there? And we get another flashback with Sephiroth, Glenn, Matt and Lucia, and again, the push in this narrative that Sephiroth and Rosen are very similar, and Sephiroth's just getting more and more resistant to it as time goes on, to the point where he eventually gets a bit angry and storms off, like, I'm gonna go and check things over here. Sick of you guys always telling me I'm like Rosen. So Sephiroth goes off, and he realises that, you know, he's not right, he needs to get a hold of himself. But then he gets attacked by a Balwar. He's like, okay, cool, I'll kill you, I suppose. Thought I'd already killed all the Balwar, thought we'd exterminated all of you, but go on, one more, why not? And after he's killed the Balwar, it's weird, he's kind of like, oh, right, I get it now. And I don't know if he's just decided in that moment that, oh yeah, if I've got a problem, I kill the problem, just like this Balwar. So if Rosen's a problem, I kill him. And then he stops distracting me. Maybe that's the realisation that Sephiroth reaches in this moment. I can't really think of anything else that maybe he understands or gets to grips with in this moment. I think it is literally he just resolves like, oh right, yeah, cool, I can just kill him. Oh, pff, how did I forget about that? Silly me. Silly me. Because now Sephiroth's very much like, I think I'd like to meet Rosen, to Glenn and the others. And yeah, red flag, red flag. But then Sephiroth's a little bit like, what would we talk about? I've never really spoke to anyone my own age before. And Glenn just immediately is like, oh yeah, I've got this thing that you could do. You could take him to the Honeybee Inn. It's like, bro, what are you doing? What are you doing? Basically, he's suggested, like, oh, you just take him to a strip club, bro. Then you can be friends. That's how you make friends with people your own age, bros. You take them to a strip club. That's essentially what's going on here. And it's just a classic Glennism. Matt and Lucia are like, oh my god, shut up, Glenn. Please shut up, Glenn. Please shut up, Glenn. And Sephiroth's just confused by the whole scenario at this point. So, you know, Glenn strikes again. But to be fair, it was a nice funny little moment in what is a little bit of a heavy chapter where we're just thinking about Sephiroth murdering Rosen the whole time. So, you know, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And then we cut back to the ruins and Sephiroth's like, oh, they were also protective of Rosen. And I thought that attachment might kill them someday. And this is the justification that he uses. And this is the similar conversation that Sephiroth has with Rosen at the end of episode 1, like the very end of episode 1 of The First Soldier, where Rosen's like, oh, well, you have to make a choice, etc., etc. Sephiroth's just justifying this, though. Like, he's making it like the attachment between Rosen and Glenn and the others is going to get them killed, in the same way that he thinks his attachment to Glenn and the others might get him killed and in danger. So that's the reason he's going with, but the real reason seems to be that he's jealous of Rosen. Like, that is genuinely what it looks like. Sephiroth is jealous that his friends have got another cool friend around his age, and yeah, that's where we're at. And Angeal kind of presses him on that. He's like, oh, so you regret it now? And Sephiroth's just like, no, it was the enemy. I regret nothing. Why would I regret killing an enemy? And Angeal's just straight on him like, really? Have you seen the state of yourself? Have you seen how you're acting right now? Are you telling me that you're not bothered by this? But Sephiroth isn't seeing it. Sephiroth's resistant to it. And yeah, he's just not seeing it. But Angeal's seeing it, and Angeal's trying to get that message across to Sephiroth, and he keeps pushing at him to try and make him see it. And every time he does, these little purple swirls appear around Sephiroth and Angeal and the group, and they get attacked. And it is almost as if Jenova, the spirits, are trying to stop Angeal from helping Sephiroth to see the truth. And after the fight, Sephiroth has kind of shaken it out of his system, and he's like, Angeal, stop it, bro. Stop it. Hits him on the nose with a rolled up newspaper and walks off. So the spirits seem to be doing their bit to stop Sephiroth from resisting. Alyssa seems to be doing her bit to bring these emotions to the forefront. And Angeal's doing his best, but it's just not happening. Batman must be so confused and scared right now. Like, Batman's just there like, bro, I'm a cameraman. What's going on? What is going on? So yeah, sucks to be Batman. Sucks to be Batman. But we continue on. And as we do continue on, there's a massive flash, and we appear in what seems to be an outside area, and Alyssa says that this is the domain of the spirits, and what we see here might not always be real. And that seems to have been the case the whole time we've been in this place, so nothing new there, but it's basically a representation of what this area used to look like. Now, as we're passing through this area, we catch up with Glenn, who stood on a bridge, and he's kind of like, hey, come on, took your time, didn't you? Crack on, let's go, we've got a Rosen to catch up to, and runs off. So Sephiroth immediately starts following, and Angeal straight on it like, Sephiroth, this shit ain't real, stop it, stop it. But Sephiroth's, again, not having any of it. And Angeal tries to convince Sephiroth. He talks about his upbringing, he talks about his mother, he talks about his father and how he was taught to cherish his dreams and his hope. And Sephiroth's like, bro, we are completely different. None of that shit means anything to me. I was raised in a lab by a crazy guy. So, you know, this is pretty redundant stuff that you're saying to me right now. You know, we are different people. We are never going to see eye to eye. So, yeah, it's kind of Angeal saying all the right things, but Sephiroth doesn't have the context to understand them. Like, he's just not that guy. He's not experienced any of that. So, Angeal can say this stuff as much as he wants. It's not going to get through. Or At least so far, it doesn't seem like it's going to get through. Anyway, we get to the end of the area, and we find a pretty weird spot. And it's this big purple portal? Purple portal. And it's called the Umbral Void. And we see Matt and Lucia in black cloaks for the first time, I think. I don't think we've seen Matt and Lucia in black cloaks before. So this is interesting, and it's the same style of black cloak as Glenn. But they come out of the portal, and then they get grabbed by a pair of hands, and Hojo appears in the middle. And he basically says to Sephiroth, pick one. Pick one to save, Matt or Lucia. And the game makes you pick. Now, I picked Lucia, I didn't pick the other way. I don't think anything different happens. I think it's not a choice that's going to impact anything. It seems to be purely symbolic. And it's all about Jenova controlling Sephiroth at this point. And it's showing him the visions of Matt and Lucia. It's showing him the vision of Hojo, that control figure who's been there all of his life calling the shots. And Sephiroth makes a choice, or you make a choice, but there's not a don't choose option. You have to pick one. So Sephiroth makes a choice. Anyway, the one that you didn't choose dies, and they're like, oh, I thought you were my friend. Clearly not. Screw you guys. And the other one survives. But then we get into a combat encounter against something that looks very Jenova-y. It's not quite Jenova, but it's very Jenova-y. It's called the Blighted Spirit, but it's got the whole Jenova vibe. It's huge. It's like a proto-Jenova, almost. That's what it looks like. It looks like an early rendition of all of the Jenova versions that we end up fighting in Final Fantasy VII. And after the fight, Lucia talks to Sephiroth a bit and says, even though you knew it was an illusion, you were still unsure. And, normal people can be like that, but you can't be like that. So, you need to sort that out. But Alyssa points out that, the heart can't tell the difference between reality and an illusion. And the pain that is triggered, the emotions that are triggered by these things, whether they're real or not, the emotion is real, and there's nothing that you can do about that. So it's an interesting one, what's going on here. We're definitely seeing the manipulation and the coercion of Sephiroth by this Jenova-affected spirit that's going on here. We're definitely seeing Sephiroth being led down a path, and we're going to see more of it as we continue through. Anyway, we hear Glenn calling again, and Glenn's like, hey, come on over here, buddy. Let's go. And Angeal's like, bro, it's an illusion. What is it? What is the illusion? Is it a monster or something? You need to blot this out. Just ignore it. Ignore the voices. And Angeal says that Sephiroth's clinging to the past, and that doing that will only get in the way of the mission, which that seems to irk Sephiroth a little bit, with Angeal then challenging Sephiroth to like, oh, prove me wrong then. Go and cut that illusion of Glenn loose. Get rid of it. And Sephiroth's not really got an answer for this until the end, when he pulls his sword out and takes a swipe at Angeal, misses, and then says, a sword like this can't even deal with someone like you. Which is, again, him reinforcing to himself that he's going to continue this mission to get this sword. So, yeah, sword. Not as much went down in this chapter, I don't think, as in the previous chapter, but there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with Sephiroth's mental state and the manipulation of Sephiroth's psyche by Jenova, and yeah, I think the next chapter's going to get pretty deep with it, but we still have the story beyond, the 3 little extra bonus bits that we get at the end of each chapter, so let's dive into them. So we pick up back with everybody, we're in the room with the Umbral Void, and everyone suggests that we take a rest, because Sephiroth's a little bit exhausted, the trials that he's going through here are pushing him to the edge, and Bachman just narrates through this and talks about the events of the chapter. This is Bachman's breakdown of the chapter, and he can see that the situation is strange and that things aren't right, but that Sephiroth is reacting to it as if it's real. And even though Angeal's tried to stop him, and even though everything around them was weird, Sephiroth was just unflinching. And he was like, no, there's a sword over there, I'm going to go and get it. And Bachman views that as a hero making difficult choices. And he also views choosing between Matt or Lucia as a hero making choices. And even having to separate himself from his past, like Angeal's suggesting, is a difficult choice that the hero is going to have to make. So Bachman's kind of viewing this all from the perspective of like Sephiroth's hero's journey, and that how he's got to have the strength to do these things in order to prove that he can wield the Masamune. And yeah, it's pretty interesting the way Bachman's reading this. I don't know if he's maybe been affected by the spirits, because we all know that in the previous chapter he got this massive lore dump from the spirits. And Batman's just kind of acting like he's happy to be here, like, yo, this could be a big moment, I should be proud to be here. So yeah, Batman's acting weird. I don't know why. Was he always this weird? He was a little bit weird, but I don't think he was this weird. So maybe the scenario is impacting Bachman. No, that was bad. I need to stop trying to make puns off his name. Anyway, that's the end of the little Bachman narration section. The next little post-chapter, yeah, that we get is Sephiroth, obviously. And we've got that purple hue again. It's going on in Sephiroth's mind in this instance. And it's a continuation of what we've already seen throughout the chapter. Sephiroth ends up surrounded by Matt, Glenn, Lucia, and even Rifu, and they all start calling him a murderer. And Sephiroth's like begging them to stop, but they're saying, no, give us back Rosen. Give us back Rosen, murderer. And Sephiroth's adamant that he had no choice. It was for their benefit. You know, it was for their own good. But then the four visions merge into one, and we end up with Rosen stood in front of Sephiroth. And at this point, once Sephiroth kind of lets out a scream of rage, Lucretia appears. Well, Jenova as she's being called in this, but you know, it is Jenova, but it's Lucretia who appears. It gets confusing sometimes which name to use, but yeah, Jenova appears to Sephiroth, taking the form of Lucretia, and tries to convince Sephiroth that, you weren't wrong. You can't get things wrong. You're Sephiroth. You obviously made the right choice. Let's not mess around here, mate. And Sephiroth saying, no, calm down, mother. You know, this is a dangerous place. You need to get out of here. And the visions of Glenn, Matt, Lucia, and Rifu all reappear. And Genova's like, no, I'm not going anywhere. I will stand here and protect my Sephiroth. Which then makes Sephiroth be like, no, let me do the protecting. And he steps forward and he cuts through the visions of everybody. And this is symbolically Jenova encouraging Sephiroth to cut his ties with everybody else. This is Sephiroth pushing himself deeper and deeper into the hole where only he and Jenova matter, him and his mother. And it's very much the same technique that Sephiroth is trying to use against Cloud in the remake project, and in the OG as well. He's trying to separate Cloud from everything that connects him to the world. He's trying to break those connections so that all that matters is Cloud and Sephiroth, because Cloud is someone that Sephiroth feels that he can control, someone that, I mean, once we go past the OG and into the Advent Children times, is someone that Sephiroth has made the core of his existence at that point, and he's tethered to Cloud in order to maintain his existence. But either way, Sephiroth is using very similar techniques to what Jenova is using on him. And I suppose it boosts the argument that Sephiroth essentially is Jenova at that point, and they are one and the same being. And Jenova's techniques are now Sephiroth's techniques. So of course, Sephiroth's going to use the same playbook to get to Cloud. Just makes sense. Anyway, the final one of these is again focused on Angeal. And it is again the same sort of stuff that we've seen in the previous chapters, but a different technique. So this time, it's Angeal's stepfather, trying to blame Angeal for everything that went wrong. You know, him joining Soldier kept the family tied to Shinra, which is something that his mother, Jillian, was trying to avoid at all costs. She was trying to get away from Shinra. So because of Angeal, they remained tied to that company. Also, he tries to make Angeal feel guilt for the fact that, you know, getting that Buster Sword is what killed his father. And he's trying to blame Angeal for that. And rather than Angeal pushing against it and resisting against it, and more importantly, developing a degree of hatred for his father, because if he develops a degree of hatred for his father, then that breaks the dreams and honor mindset that Angeal has, which is his strongest weapon against Jenova. So you can see what Jenova's trying to do. He's trying to get through that hard shell that Angeal has built up because of the relationships that he has. The relationships that he has had in his life are so strong that Jenova's struggling to break through them, and he can use them as a crutch. So Jenova's trying to eradicate those relationships in the same way that we just saw Sephiroth have those relationships eradicated by Jenova, so that Sephiroth is more single-minded and more focused on Jenova. But rather than developing hatred, Angeal instead accepts the fault and accepts the blame, and he's like, if this is what it is, this is what it is. If I've got to atone, then I have to atone. And this obviously isn't the reaction Jenova wants, we all know that, and the vision of Angeal's father disappears, and we get a shot of the Buster Sword in that position that we see from the intro screen of Final Fantasy VII and now the remake and rebirth games. So, you know, we don't see the sword do that often, so that was pretty cool. But as the sword appears there, it's got like some live stream energy kind of coming off it, and it's definitely suggesting that something within the sword, or Angeal's connection with the sword, helped him in that moment and protected him, which is what we've been seeing the whole time. And it just feeds into this whole, like, is the Buster Sword a bit more special than we thought? You know, are they going to write a little bit of additional stuff into it? It's very possible. It is very possible. But Angeal is showing the flip side of Sephiroth in that the connections that he's got with people and the relationships that he had with his family, they're a source of strength for him, rather than with Sephiroth, it's being framed as a source of weakness and being used to control him. So it's interesting to see the flip side of this, and even Angeal realizes this at the end of the chapter, and he sees it and he's like, you know, I'm going to help. I'm going to make sure that I stay strong, and I'm going to help Sephiroth. So yeah, all around, very interesting chapter. A lot of focus on the relationships that people have got. A lot of focus on Jenova working on Sephiroth and trying to work on Angeal. Some focus on the area, but not as much this time. Less history of Rador and Robio and Igara, and very much focused on Sephiroth, and definitely focused on the events of Rador that happened in the previous episode of The First Soldier, and why Sephiroth did what he did regarding Rosen. And he can come up with as many justifications as he wants. It definitely feels like he was threatened by Rosen just stealing his friends away. That's definitely what it seemed like. Oh, you can't be friends with him. You're friends with me. I'm not having that. He's going to steal my attention. And so he killed him. That's what it's starting to feel like. But he's shielding himself and throwing up these justifications like, oh, your friendship with Rosen definitely made you weaker, so I killed him in order to make you stronger. And it's just a bad justification. But we're getting a lot of that with Sephiroth. These flawed, bad justifications for the shit that he does. And we're definitely seeing the formation of the Sephiroth that we see in Crisis Core and in Final Fantasy VII. So it's good to see. It's a very good chapter. Definitely let me know what you're thinking about the chapter in the comments below, and what you're thinking about episode 2 of The First Soldier in general. Are you enjoying this story of Sephiroth getting the Masamune and dealing with the events of the previous episode in Rador? Just let me know what you're thinking. But yeah, like the video, subscribe for future content, but more importantly than all of that, have a great day.